When I think back to Code Geass, I think about one or more of these three things. Firstly, it's irritation, remembering how painful my backside felt after 3 minutes of using the exercise bike whilst I watched 1 or 2 episodes of Code Geass after being recommended it years ago by my friend and YouTube Let's Player Eric Van Wilderman. I mean, let's be real, those seats are pure torture, but anyway, I digress. The second thought is how the universe, story, character building and pacing was on a level I hadn't yet seen. I fell utterly head over heels in love with this unique creation. Then the third thing often on my mind is the stupidity behind one of the most infamous scenes. A moment meant to round up the pressure towards the end of R1, or its first season, and that scene is the very one we're going to be talking about today in this news show aptly called Sinful, a deep dive into a sinful scene or anime that deserved more than 1 or 2 sins. Before we crack on, I'm going to kindly request that you subscribe if you haven't already. I'm more than committed to revitalising this channel with brand new and interesting content. I rested on my anime sins only content for far too long to the detriment of this channel, and a subscribe from you would mean a lot. As well as, of course, a like and a comment and watching as much of this video as you can. Long story short, it all translates to better views and me being able to feed my 2 dogs and put food on the table for my wife and I. Anyway, as the scene begins, we witness Lelouch at the culmination of all of his efforts as the head of the rebellion. He's agreed to halt his actions, and the future for Japan looks brighter than it ever had before. This is until, of course, Lelouch suddenly loses control of his Geass and jokes that it'd be totes lols if Euphemia went and ordered that all Japanese people be murdered.
俺が本気で命令したら誰だって逆らえない。俺を撃て。朱雀を解任しろ。どんな命令でもね。本当だよ。例えば日本人を殺せって言ったら君の意思とは関係ない。
Now, of course, I embellish a little for laughs, because that's my jam, and when you people laugh at my jokes, it sustains me at my core, but the point remains the same, and is the source of the fundamental issue I have with this scene. Lelouch, throughout the previous 21 episodes, is characterised as someone who is highly intelligent beyond his years, and extremely on the ball about pretty much everything. Basically, for lack of a better term, he's able to mentally juggle about 15 different balls, whilst most of us and his enemies can handle 2 or 3. To deep dive ever so slightly on this, it's clear that he's thinking in one hand about the current battle he's raging. He's mentally moving pieces around an invisible board for the most part. But at the same time, he's viewing the optics of this specific victory, the chain of command, the losses from the battle, recouping those losses, and then outside of battle, what's coming next? What do we need to be doing in order to ensure a high chance of victory? Politics, science, allies, and so on and so forth. So when he turns around and jokes that if he told her to kill all the Japanese people, she'd have to do it, it feels very out of character. On top of everything I've just said, it bears to keep in mind that in addition to being intelligent, to put it lightly, and being very mindful of all kinds of affairs, he's also well spoken. He doesn't speak to hear his own voice. He chooses his words carefully and says only what is needed to be said. This classically gives him an air of authority near the start of the season on top of the anonymity, as we see even troublemakers and former leaders in his inner circle happily submit to him, because there's just something awesome about not knowing someone's face whilst they command others using just like 10 cool ass words. Now at this stage, it's time to play devil's advocate. One could argue that being in the same room as his half sister after so much blood, sweat and tears to get there may have momentarily dulled his sense of self, but I personally cast this aside as a poor excuse. Lelouch wasn't fully safe at that point. Yes, hostilities had all but ended, but nothing had officially been ratified at that point, so it feels uncharacteristically laid back to relax at that point, especially when taking into consideration how hard fought the victories to get there were, and that he cleverly is always 10 steps ahead of everyone else, until that one extremely important moment in time. Lastly on this subject, it should be kept in mind that he already knew of Mao, the other Geass user who lost control over his own power, and yet knowing this, flaunted his own power with reckless regard. Again, something I don't think Lelouch would have ever done. It also feels incredibly ridiculous as a statement. It's so over the top and out of the blue. He never had to reveal his power to her, but he chooses to do so right then and there, proclaiming that if I really order someone to do something no one can resist, to shoot me, to dismiss Suzaku, any order at all. Naturally, she doesn't believe him and says he's being silly, but no, this isn't enough for Lelouch. He has to go one step further, giving yet another example, but this time one that would devastate a bloody nation and further the war. All because, hey no, really? Let me give you another example of an order you theoretically wouldn't be able to say no to. Now, as if this wasn't bad enough already, in order to ensure that the admittedly fantastic plot twist can actually occur, it's then written into the story that he says, "No, forget that order, no!" as she picks up a gun and runs outside, and he literally just stands there, arm extended in defiance. Oh no! Come back! It's all microwaved to create a shock twist before the end of the season, and it's done very poorly. Now, this scene isn't without its merits, of course. It did a fantastic job of showing Euphemia in an amazing looking light, given that she and she alone was able to withstand the power of the Geass for a few moments, whilst everyone else immediately broke down and followed the orders without question. That was an awesome moment to put in. It showed how much she didn't want to do it, how kind she was, and how much she believed in true equality and naturally struggled with it mentally before being lost to the power. Another great element is how it showed the Britannia soldiers in a split light. Many displayed true courage by refusing to carry out her order, many of the higher up characters especially being confused by what was happening. It played out very well for character development. It also highlighted how many of the rank and file didn't see the Japanese as humans and seemed to relish in attacking them as soon as the order was given. So there was an interesting split shown there. I think a much better and more logical approach, taking into consideration everything we know about Lelouch at Zero, would have been to have him quip his original statement, but then change the follow-up to something along the lines of, "Or if I ordered you to go kill a citizen, you'd have to do it." This would carry some weight in its own regard as she runs outside and puts a bullet, maybe silently, into the closest Japanese person. Which would logically be the case since everyone else near her were in the military and are thus not civilians. This dark moment would have had immense shock value. It also makes more sense than saying all of the Japanese, a much more illogical statement for him to make, and it would do away with the kind of cheesy speech from her asking them all to off themselves. If she carried out this new order, all you'd need is one overzealous soldier to open fire themselves on the crowd, and others would follow, leading to the same outcome. Of course, it's not without its own pitfalls, as the higher-ups wouldn't think the war is back on without her saying as much, but it's a minor issue. Anyway, let me know your thoughts on the subject. You can also tell me if there's any dumb scenes in anime you think I should tackle. I have a few on the back burner, but I'd love to know your thoughts. Also, please do leave a like and a comment and subscribe. As stated, it helps more than you know. And if you really love my content, you can check out my Patreon linked below to support myself and my family directly. And of course, I'll see you next time. Chris Harris, Ted L, Inakami and Water, Manuel Morales, Marquez, Nick Wyndham, Waterkeeper, Steelers, The Epic Commander, Bird Without a Word, Blitzkyle, Brandon Creer, Gaten 2000, Kieran Robinson, Cumfreak, Kim Munt, Magnus, Matthew Casterline, Nathan Burr, Sean, Ali50, Dark Lord Bloody Soul, Guru, Isel Caldera, Yor Edvinson, Jonas Stahl, Jordan Samuels, Jaffa6263, Kelnock, Kepon, Kevin Nalter, Conito, Luis Cruz, Matthew Blanchett, Matt the Marshmallow, 1928, Sentimento, Storm 970, The Elemental Wars.